Okay, we are back to talk about Severance, Season 2, Episode 3, titled Who is Alive? This episode written by Wei Ning Yu and directed by Ben Stiller. By way of recap, we start with Mark timing himself, see how long it takes to get to the severed floor. Once he gets there, he gives jobs to everyone in MDR so they can try and locate Miss Casey. Mark and Helly go together and they visit the goats at the Mammalians Nurturable, and they meet Brienne of Tarth. No, that's actually Lorne, a new character that they meet for the first time. Irving visits O&D, where he reminisces about Bert with Felicia and learns about the exports hall, which is what he has been painting all of this time. Instead of doing his part to search the break room, Dylan is granted an 18-minute meeting with his Audi wife, Gretchen. On the outside, Natalie talks to Rickon about creating a copy of the UUR specifically for innies. Milchick receives a very strange promotion present from the board and from Miss Nikki. Miss Colbell confronts Helena about getting her job back, but then ends up running away after an invite to meet with the board. Mark and Devin try to burn the image "Who is Alive" into Mark's retinas so that he can recall it when he goes down to the severed floor and his innie can see that message. That ends up being why he was trying to time his entrance into the place. But Dr. Ragabi shows back up and tells him that is a ridiculous idea and offers to reintegrate Mark. After she tells Mark she has seen Gemma alive, he quickly agrees to the procedure, and the episode ends with Mark flashing back and forth between his innie and outie self, presumably leading to some things just going to tell us that he is either partially or wholly reintegrated. So I don't know necessarily how to feel about that. I'd hate to lose any Mark, but that seems to be what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it either.
I'd hate to lose any characters,
Right. Have we
but
already lost Helly R? I'm not positive. We'll talk about that
potentially
more here in a moment. Um, man, we're moving right along.
this is
I was kind of surprised. It was like, oh, really? Oh, already? Okay. Third episode of the season. And as I read that final scene, I mean, I read it as Mark is reintegrated in that final scene because he's cutting between his consciousness in his basement and his consciousness waking up on the table, and
yeah.
that we
It doesn't
see the
seem that there's
wavelengths coming into harmony, as it were.
it doesn't seem to be ambiguity as the episode ends. It seems to be that it is accomplished. Whether it stays accomplished, I don't know, but it doesn't seem that we've got a PD problem on our hands. She says somehow, despite it being only a few days later, that she's much better at the procedure. So I guess we have to assume that it's been done.
Yeah, this worries me too because we saw PD in season one, and he was not okay, and he ultimately died, right? And I sort of had this line that reintegration made his head explode, literally, right? That like there's something about it that you just can't handle. And if you think about it, right, there's one thing I want to say here at this point. I've long held that reintegration is not the solution to the central problem of Severance, the show and the procedure, right? Like
Right.
if that central problem is about the split between innie and outie and all of that kind of stuff. Um, Now, I mean, of course, the show could be written in a way where reintegration seems like the solution or resolution. And I really
Yeah.
hope that they don't do that. I guess that's part of what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Am I making sense here?
Yeah. Yeah. And also thought you were going to, you may be doing this, but you're clarifying the idea that there's reintegration, which is the combining of the two selves, as opposed to the, you know, turn off the severance, which would just mean the innie is lost completely.
Yeah. I think those are two distinct possibilities,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Um, Although, maybe we should be careful because, perhaps those any memories are stored in the brain in some way, one way or another, something like that, right? So, of course, when you're in the outside world with your severance chip, you don't experience the innie's experiences.
Hmm.
But maybe you need to have the chip in order for that to work. Maybe, who knows what would happen if you remove the chip. We don't actually know the answers to those questions to know. But yeah, I mean, so to say just a little bit more on that, what I mean is that, if we think about all these questions of things like exploitation or whatever else, involved in the idea of the severance procedure, really alienation is probably the better
Yeah.
concept. Like Marx talks about alienation in terms of, the separation of oneself from the product of one's labor, that sort of thing. I think they're playing with. And, to me, it'd be really disappointing if at the end of the day, all of our indie friends get reintegrated and it's just
Mm.
like, oh, well, the Audis learned a lesson and everything's all, because it
Yeah.
really does feel like they're separate and distinct persons within the show.
See, I have to, after 12 episodes, I believe enough that they want this show to be about severance and not want it to be about reintegration. That we're not going to spend two, three, 4 seasons in the land of the reintegrated. I also think that it's one thing for Helena slash Helly to go down and pretend that she is the any version that she is severed because she has access to information and videotapes and security stuff and anything they can tell her about how that person's supposed to act and what that person's supposed to do and all this stuff. She watched the video footage of her and Mark sharing that kiss. Mark S knows none of that. So how in the world is he supposed to pass off that he is not his any self anymore?
Yeah, I'm worried about this too, insofar as, I mean, so narratively, okay, this makes sense because we're on the path of Mark trying to find Gemma, both Marks, right? And so for Audi Mark to learn that at least the last time Ragavi saw her, Gemma was indeed alive inside of Lumen, it
Hmm.
makes sense that Mark would say, okay, let's do it. I want to see my wife again, whatever it takes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you're raising a question that I also found myself thinking about, which is what it will the reintegrated Mark be able to go to work and not be immediately found out?
Right.
The personality differences are so stark, and Milchek even called our attention to them in the previous episode when he's talking to the Audi version of Mark, and he said, that kind of sadness that's cut through you,
Mhm.
that's not there with your inning. He's happy, right? So it's
Yeah.
like Audi Mark's grief is written all over his face.
Yeah.
So how's that going to work even just practically is a question as well.
It's one thing to have the memories and the knowledge of what you did down there. It's another to try to adopt a personality, as you're saying, is to try to become someone wholly else. And I just don't, I don't see how that would last very long down there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one interesting possibility is, well, when Ragavi says she's gotten better at it, maybe that goes together with not a full reintegration.
Mm,
Like maybe the mistake with PD was trying to just like jam everything together all at once, and that created too much of a problem. Because you start saying something like that she can create a version of Mark who remembers he loves Gemma and can also, and then he cuts her off,
yeah.
right, in the dialogue. Um, so one way we might read that would be to suggest that we're not getting a full integration, but some kind of partial integration. Um, so in other words, maybe we're going to get a third kind of Mark, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the pathway apparently that PD was on was, not something that he wasn't following the procedure or the pathway that Gabi laid out for him. So that's why things went haywire. Is there a path that sort of this evolves over time or that he becomes more or better integrated over time? I'm just not sure. Just what does Marcus have to do to make it more successful, obviously, than Petey did?
Yeah, we'll see,
Yeah.
and I didn't really expect this quickly, but it does make sense in terms of even going back to how season one ended. You have this question about Gemma being alive. So it makes sense to bring things to a head to where, okay, that means Mark is going to be up for reintegration to try to find Swire. That does make sense.
Yeah. I just I think I'm down to I trust it. I trust what they're
Yeah.
going to do. But just am unsure of how it will get there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I don't trust the creators of this show,
Right, right.
because I do. But at the same time, there are certain things where, that trust is called upon, as it were, because all I'm really trying to say is this is a moment where they could mess it up.
Yeah,
You know, it's
that's right.
kind of a
That's right.
pivotal moment in what this series is to see how they handle this moving forward.
Yeah. And to your point, and this I think certainly works in the same context of you talking about how fast they're going, to have someone go through reintegration, to be introduced to the levels of the new departments that we have, to have Felicia say, I know where that is. I can tell you where that hallway is. We're moving towards at least some potential resolutions quite quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. Are we just stunned because we've been watching Silo for the previous 10 weeks, Um, but yeah, man, because okay, I mean, but let's talk about some of these other things, and then we can think more about, well, what might happen even next week. Um, we have Irving going to O&D, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
and I read this as a ploy, that he wanted Felicia to see that drawing. Like, hey, look at my notebook full of drawings of Bert. Oh, whoops! No, don't. Oh, don't look at that. Oh, what? Oh, you recognize it? Okay.
Yeah. But just
Um,
based on an assumption that she would know what it was. I mean, I guess you can play that card and just hope you're right.
or just, yeah, I mean, or if she doesn't, then maybe, she hardly notices it, and um, but he's definitely caught up on that more than on looking for Gemma. It is worth noting that he doesn't know the connection between the two that we know, right? Because we saw
Yeah,
Gemma go down that hallway. He doesn't know that bit.
that's
But
right.
those things seem to be coming together. Felicia refers to it as the exports hall. Something kind of interesting about that. Um, recall what we saw of O&D in season one. Not the
Hmm.
stuff with the paintings, which we see again here. The other bit. You remember that?
Oh, yes,
Where they
yes,
had like the weird cards that almost
yes.
seemed like fighting instructions or whatever.
And Dylan stole one. Yes,
And Dylan stole one. And and they were talking about the weird things they were being asked to make and not understanding why, and so on. And some of them definitely seemed like weapons and stuff like that.
yes,
Um, well, Felicia says that they're regularly sending things to this exports hall. They used to take them themselves, but now they send a guy, right? But what we know is that is like the testing floor, where, I mean, presumably there are people beyond Miss Casey. We don't know what they're doing down there, but I
yeah,
did think it was
yeah,
interesting to think about O&D sending this stuff there.
yeah. And that what has happened so that they are no longer allowed that access or allowed to go down there? Is it just because people are on to what's happening, or they've something's happened with Miss Casey and or others? Yeah, just that's become another in a long line of mysteries right now.
Yeah, I mean, that part could be as simple as, well, they would recognize Miss Casey or whoever else, and
Yeah,
so you can't risk that. And maybe that didn't used to be the case. I don't know. Regardless, you've got that going on. Mark and Helly find the goats, the goat people. But they don't really learn a whole lot. I mean, I enjoyed this scene, but we don't really get much information from this scene. I don't know. Thoughts on Mammalian's Deturable?
Yeah. This seems to be this is one of those interesting things that I told you listening to the Ben Stiller and Adam Scott podcast this morning. They release it basically the same time as when the episode comes out. So they spend a lot of time talking about this because they said of the questions that come in, close to half of them are about the goats, right? This entire series, all anybody wants to know about is the goats and what they mean, what they're for. And they do say that there's a specific purpose that they are there for, and it's something that will be revealed in sort of the grand revelation of what's happening there. But to your point, I don't know that we learn a lot about or anything about what that is, other than this is just a large staff of people that are once again protective of what they do and distrustful of other people in other departments. And apparently, like O&D thought in season one, they also think that MDR have pouches growing out of their stomachs.
Yeah. Yeah. They spread these internal rumors
Yeah.
and, for whatever reason. And I mean, there is something distinctive about how the people look in a
Mm.
way. I mean, I don't know. Are all those people going home at the end of the day every day? Like there's a guy who's dressed like a
Good question. Good
goat,
question.
big
Yeah.
or ram or whatever. Um,
They should
I
have
don't
a
know.
little
So
longer process at the lockers than the MDR does, to get changed and back into their Audi self.
it's something to think about at least.
Yeah, yeah.
Are they coming into the building dressed like that or what?
Yeah.
And recall PD's map had a section that said like people live here question mark or something,
Hmm.
which I've taken more to refer to the testing floor as a possibility, but we don't really know. One thing I did find kind of odd in my own experience watching the episode, and I wonder if you agree with me on this, is so yeah, of course there's been a question about the goats from the first time we saw the guy with the baby goat in season
Hmm.
one, and it's like emblematic of the weirdness of the show and
Yes.
so on and so forth. For me, in a weird way, simply getting the name Mammalians Naturable assuaged my curiosity meaningfully. What about you? This is they gave me a name for it.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm trying to think, what can we read into the names of, this is just another department, clearly, but optics and design, data refinement, somewhat describe the work that's being done there. I'm glad that we know the name of this, but I don't know what it tells me. But it does,
Well,
well, sort of scratch an itch a little
they're
bit.
they're nurturing mammals.
Yeah, for what?
Why are they nurturing mammals?
Why are they
We don't
refining
know.
data?
But
Yeah,
that's what we don't know what's going on with the other departments meaningfully either, right? It's not really
no,
more of a question than it is with O&D. I mean, of course, at one level, we know that O&D puts paintings up on the walls of the office, but we also saw that's almost not even the main thing that they're doing, whatever
right,
they're doing in that other room. MDR is refining data. It's the work is mysterious and important. We've gotten the indication that maybe all of those files are people, right? It seems
yeah,
like the Cold Harbor file is Miss Casey.
yeah.
I still don't really understand what's going on there. I don't know. Anyway, it was just kind of striking to me how that at a certain level, it just kind of felt like, oh, well, I know what to call it now.
Y-
So
yes,
it's not as much of a mystery because I have a name for it. Just got me thinking about that kind of aspect of human psychology or something
yeah.
like that, right?
If you can, this is one corner piece of the puzzle, and maybe we have two or three others. We certainly don't see the whole picture of what it is. However, we can see how things might build out and work from that.
Yeah. I don't understand it, but I know what to call it now.
Yeah.
Um, any speculations you want to make about what is going on with the goats?
Seen a lot of conjecture online about cloning, about,
Mm-hmm.
these just basically being lab rats or,
Mm-hmm.
things that they can experiment on them and have to keep them healthy and nurtured so that, in a similar way that they're probably trying, if they are resurrecting or cloning people in the floors below, they have to nurture them and keep them healthy. Sort of the, practice makes perfect thing where we can adopt what we learn here down there.
Yeah, I mean something like that would make sense. I don't know. I don't know what else it could be quite. But
Yep.
we're practicing severance on goats, really severed goats. Maybe. Yeah, I don't
Yeah, could be.
know. But yeah. So, sorry, putting this together, right? Mark and Helly on the inside. They're looking for Miss Casey at least. Irving I have to presume that Felicia does tell him where that exports hall is. We don't see that, but he asks,
Right.
"Do you know where
Right.
it is?" And then the scene ends. So then, okay, let's add a little bit more before I say the next thing I want to say. Mark is undergoing some process of reintegration.
Hmm.
Helly, we still think is Helena, right? We still think that's Audi Helena.
I don't see enough difference to make me think otherwise at this point.
Yeah, if anything, this episode kind of made me feel even more confident, right? Because they have that adorable, awkward moment in the hallway that's like almost maybe a kissing moment or whatever, right? Um, and I kind of feel like any Hallie might have just initiated the kiss.
Yeah, that
I don't know.
I'll,
She did in the first season. She was the one
you
who
know,
initiated that kiss in the first
you know
season.
what's funny? I almost thought Audi Helena would have initiated it more at this point than any Helly, because any Helly's
Interesting.
like, oh, we're searching for his wife now. This is what he now cares about. He doesn't care about me. Whereas Audi Helena wants some of that action that Helly got in the first season. She's jealous of that.
Yeah.
I don't
E- Everything is ambiguous enough that you could read it
know.
either way,
Yeah.
which is probably good. But I feel like we might be getting some resolution of that question, maybe as soon as the next episode. How is this going to go? Mark's going to come into work reintegrated or semi reintegrated or whatever. We'll see. If that is the Audi, Helena Egan, um, not only is Helly, well, look, either way, I think Helly's going to notice a difference in Mark's demeanor.
Yes.
But if it's any Helly, not a huge risk. But if it's the Audi, Helena Egan, you're in trouble, right? This whole plan of looking for Gemma's in trouble at that point, I would think.
That's
Um,
exactly right. And then also, how far would, if it is Helena playing Helly, how far does Helena playing Helly go to um, reveal that she knows something's wrong because she also knows what Mark is like on the outside, and she sort of blow her own cover by doing that. I don't know what she would do in that situation.
yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting. You're right. Actually, we might try to play it off, right?
Hmm.
And not call him out if that is the Audi healing that, and we'll write about that. It just feels like that question can't linger too much longer. This narrative's really progressing,
Yeah.
and because it's also hard to see a reason why we wouldn't be getting to that hallway next episode.
Yeah.
Irving's pretty close,
If we know
right?
the way, then yeah, then why aren't we going there? Yeah.
That at least Irving would go there.
Yeah.
Dylan, I don't know. He's been he's been kind of sidelined and bribed by the visitation with his Audi's wife, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
This is some real cold manipulation and just condescension from Milchick and Miss Wong and everybody else. I mean, just to not only dangle that in front of him, but also to I don't know, to have that introduction, which I'm sure is something he craves, but then have that be this thing where his wife is not that she's not interested, but she just has to be standoffish because it's not the same person.
it's it's really kind of a poignant scene. Watching it again yesterday evening, I found myself feeling like this is really weirdly sad.
Mm.
Um, I mean, also kind of touching. Um, I don't know how it landed for you. There's also humor in it, of course, like
There
when
is a lot of humor in it. Did it
um
strike you that Gretchen almost seems to be more affectionate towards any Dylan than the Audi Dylan who forgot the cookies and is just sitting in front of the TV and and all that stuff? It's sort of a the mystery and intrigue of this new version of himself, or potentially better version of himself.
I don't know. I didn't read it quite that way.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like she's a little. I think I think the scene plays the way it should. I mean,
Mm,
it's very difficult to say this seems realistic, but that's what I mean, sort of, right?
yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
you can put yourself in the space of fully accepting the premise and that you have the any version of Dylan, and okay, so what would it be like to go and visit the any version of your significant other? It would be an odd experience,
It would be
you know?
very odd. And that's, she almost either doesn't want to or doesn't know how to describe it when she gets back to Audi Dillon. It's just that way. It was good. It was weird good. I mean, that's all she can say. It's just, how would you describe something like that?
Yeah. And you also wonder, like, how much is she supposed to? Right?
Hmm.
Like, has Milchick told her that she's not supposed to tell the Audi Dylan about what happens with the Innie Dylan for reasons, you know? I wouldn't be surprised. Um, it is, I mean, part of the sadness doesn't quite feel like the right word, but I'm struggling to find a better one. But again, particularly on my second viewing of it, the way that Innie Dylan is reacting to learning that his Audi or himself or whatever has struggled to keep other jobs and things like this,
Hmm.
just kind of bursting his balloon of thinking that on the outside he does muscle shows. It's like Andy Dillon thinks he's a really cool guy or whatever, and he's finding out that
Yeah.
he's not. So there's that level to it. He doesn't know how to react when she hugs him and says, "I love you," because of
Hmm.
course he doesn't.
Yeah.
They don't really, I enjoyed the scene a lot. I mean, I hope that we get more of this. At the same time, you're right. It is very manipulative on Lumen's part too.
Yeah. And wasn't this room like in the conceptual drawing stage like 3 days ago? And then, like now it's already built. I guess it was already built. And he just showed him the plans for it.
Yeah, probably it was already built and he showed him the plans for it. However, Dylan thinks that he's going to the security server room and he's not, right? So they've moved things around. They've replaced the server room where he was at the end of season one with this now.
That, yeah.
And they must have done that like over the weekend. They must have been quick about that.
Yeah, yeah, it's logistical things we may have to either accept we don't get an explanation or overlook, I think.
Well, we did see there was a scene back in season one where overnight they had workers coming in and moving stuff around and changing door
Yes.
locks and stuff like that. So um, you know, and it's also the style of the Lumen office. Do you have any experience with buildings like this in real life? Because I actually
Not
do.
not like this. No,
I
no.
mean, not exactly like this, but there was when I was at the new school, um originally it was in like an old remodeled Woolworths, but then we moved to an office building over on God, what was it, 15th Street, 16th Street. This I'm sure it's probably still where the new school for social research is. But each floor, the walls were almost like kind of modular in a way in order to create
Okay.
the rooms, I think.
Yeah.
And I could be manipulated in theory, but there were no windows or anything in the hallway, and it was all very kind of similar to Lumen in a certain way. I always think
Wow.
about where it's just kind of like white, and then like you'd go into the classrooms that were in the middle, and there'd be no windows, and it was all just kind of very nondescript. I mean, I absolutely hated it, honestly.
Yeah.
If
Oh
you
yeah.
went into the classrooms on the outside, then there'd be windows, and like you could see outside, and like that was mildly better. But overall, the design was just really just kind of claustrophobic, you know. Um, but not nearly as complicated because in a building I'm talking about, it was just kind of like one hallway that went all the way around the outside,
Yeah,
and then rooms in the middle and rooms on the outside.
exactly.
Whereas with Lumen, it's more like a maze. But
Yeah. And
because it's
everything's
more
done.
like, yeah, because it's more like a maze and the walls are so nondescript and everything, right? So, we were just saying, oh, they replaced the server room with this other room over the weekend. Maybe they didn't, right? Like maybe they just
You'd have no idea.
moved walls or something like
Yeah.
this. And Dylan is confused, thinking that he's going somewhere that is different from where he actually goes.
So who have we not talked about yet? We've not talked a lot about Miss Cobell. We haven't talked
No.
about the Milchick Natalie interaction. A
Yeah.
couple of big things left to pursue here.
I guess let's go to Milchick first, and Natalie. Natalie, who also visits Rickon on the outside to
Yeah.
discuss a version of his book for the innies, which is amusing. I think that's another level of maybe trying to manipulate, um, sorry, Devin, actually,
Oh yeah,
in
yeah,
a certain way, more than Rickon, right? Because if you recall in the previous episode, um, Drummond was of the opinion that Devin was maybe more of a problem than Mark. Howdy, Mark. Um, so maybe the move in a certain way is to try to give Devin's husband this book contract with Lubin that kind of puts them in bed together that somehow undermines Devin's ability to threaten Lubin or something like that.
yeah.
Um, I find Natalie to be really great and really entertaining. I don't know about you.
I find, especially in this episode, some of her acting, the face acting, to be unbelievable, particularly in the couple of moments after the board call is dropped and she's like lost the smile and she is giving him like this almost like I'm sorry sympathetic face.
Yeah,
She has to immediately reverse it. I just thought it was amazing.
great face acting in that scene.
Yeah,
In general, Natalie seems like she's all surface. It seems like she has no soul. But obviously, there's more going on. But I love that moment in that scene where Natalie, speaking on behalf of the board, informs Milchick that I, Natalie, received a similar. Right. She says something like, the board wants you to know that I, Natalie, got a similar gift and enjoyed it immensely or
yeah, enjoyed it
whatever.
immensely.
It was like because it's her talking, but it's not her talking. It's the board talking through her. But let's talk about the milkshake of it all and those paintings. I mean, face acting on Tramal Tillman's part here as well in that scene because the board's presented him with a series of Keir Egan paintings in which Keir Egan is black.
Yeah. In a spirit of inclusivity or re-canonicalized versions of what's have I just
To
that
help him
was
see
sort of
himself in the founder.
it was a left turn I was not expecting out of, of the show.
Me neither. But so Milchick sees him, he says, oh my. Yeah. But I think you can read on his face throughout the scene the level to which he is. I don't even know if offended is the right word, but something like that. I think it's played brilliantly on his face, and we're left to sort of read into that to what extent
Yeah.
um, he is finding this racially offensive, or I don't know what term to go to. I mean, it seems maybe vaguely racist,
Yeah.
sort of,
And he just, I mean, to the point, just immediately pack it up and put it on the top of the shelf. I mean, he wants nothing to do with it.
yeah, ultimately, and I think that's the biggest thing where we could see some confirmation that it's landing for him along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, yeah, he and Natalie kind of exchanged some facial expressions, but there's no getting away from their official roles at Lumen. Um, After all, Lumen is listening, and that probably does also mean they're listening to you, right? Um, but yeah, I thought all of that was great, and I wonder where things go with Milchick. I mean, on the one hand, he's very much part of Lumen. He's in management. We
Yeah.
haven't gotten a lot of indications that he's ever going to like turn against Lumen or anything like that. Um, except maybe this in the smallest degree or something about where this might go. Like, is he going to get in trouble because he didn't hang those paintings in his office?
Yeah. I mean, and are there, you know, hundreds of little paper cuts that add up to something big? The computer screen, Miss Wong is his number two. These paintings, just sort of questioning how he handled the overtime and the people that he brought in when he was given a weekend to do, just chipping away at him, even though he seems much more dedicated than Cobell ever was.
Yeah, and let's go to her, right? Because she comes back and wants her old job back, wants Milchek to be fired. One thing that struck me is she didn't have new demands in the scene, so I didn't quite know what to make of that. Like she's decided to try again, but she's not asking for anything different at all.
And there was something that made her go back. She's
Mm-hmm.
sleeping on the side of the road. She sees this sign of this, you know, place that's Salt's Neck that's however many miles away.
Not a real place.
Yeah, we get this glimpse of the breathing tube in the backseat of her car that we saw as her part of her shrine last year. That convinces her to go back. Then the conversation with Helena seems to take a couple of steps forward, but she gets spooked by something. So it's sort of this not sure what she wants, nor what her intentions are, nor what her motivations are at this point, other than I'm not sure she cares a lot about what Lumen is trying to do with Cold Harbor. I think she cares about Mark and wants something to do with him. I just don't know what it is.
Maybe so. The breathing tube says Charlotte Cobell on it. I keep seeing people on the internet say this is her mother,
Yep,
but I'm not
same.
sure if we know that. I'm just
That's
really not
been
sure if we know that.
it's widely out there. I don't know the evidence to support that, but it is definitely the prevailing opinion.
I feel like it was, uh, you know, speculation or conjecture or whatever the first time we saw this. And, it makes some sense. It's in the context of her shrine in that first scene where we see it, where we also see the Myrtle Egan School for Girls or whatever, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Um, but I still I don't think that we know that it was her mother's. You know, I'm just not sure that that's been definitively
Yeah,
established. So I just wanted to mention that because there are other possibilities, right? Like maybe it's hers and her name is actually Charlotte. Maybe it was her daughter's or something. Oh, I know why people think it was her mother's. Now I remember. There's a date on it.
there's a date. So the official
But
Severance Wiki describes her as a relative of Harmony Cobell. Does list the date of birth, March 17th, 1944,
yeah,
that suggests could be her mother, although not explicitly stated.
yeah, because I mean, what's the other part of that equation? What year is this?
Right.
Okay, well, let's talk about something else in relation to that, which I didn't realize was going to be a connection here, but this is good. I love when stuff like this happens. Why are all the car models old? Do you notice
I was
this?
going to ask you the same question as to when do we think that we are? And I thought up until one moment in this episode that we were in like the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, I
However,
mean, the
Helena,
car thing
Helena pulls out a very
pulls out
modern
her
cell phone.
iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is good, right? Because the car model thing, well, I mean, this has been a question we could have been asking all along, and I'm sure some people have. It's definitely always struck me that Miss Cobell or Selvig, Cobelvig drives a Volkswagen Rabbit. Is it of significance that it's a white rabbit?
Yeah.
I don't know. How much do we read into things, right? Um, anyhow, no, but seriously, maybe there was something there. But yeah, I mean, I think if you if we think further about the tech and so on and so forth, of course, the
Yeah.
technology within the Lumen office seems a bit old school or something. Um, and but then, yeah, as you mentioned, it's this seems like it must be very intentional because I'm seeing not only a rabbit but all the other cars in that parking lot in this episode. And the questions really coming to the top of my mind, thinking, all of these seem like old makes and models of cars. And I actually started asking myself, have we ever seen a smartphone in this show? And then, like 5 seconds later, Helena pulls one out.
Lana pulls one out. So there's this obvious question that people have been asking of where are we? There's the question that's
Mm-hmm.
developing of when are we? We don't know that we necessarily know definitively answers to either of those things. I mean, I think we have to now assume we're in some sort of more modern time collectively because of the sense of that cell phone. I got to tell you, I would left this episode thinking something that I don't know. I don't have a fully formed thought on this yet, but based on those pieces of evidence, the the fact that there nothing seems to be modern except something owned by an Egan. There are never many people around anywhere in the outside world. I'm sort of developing a theory that the outside world is a severed world also,
Oh,
and
okay.
that it's just it is all a model set up by Egan and Lumen to do something. Sort of what does the world look like when people think they're severed and unsevered? Right? I don't know, but the only things that I can find that have any sort of modernity to it are from. So Egan's had a cell phone. The
Uh-huh.
Egan party is the only place where there's been a big collection of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have for my theory so far, but something I'm monitoring.
Okay, so maybe something like that, not the whole outer world, but that they have the town of Kier, and I mean, it does seem pretty isolated. I don't know where we are, but when we see Cobell driving, it definitely feels like
Yeah.
northern Great Plains. There's always snow, so we're in Alberta or something. I don't know.
The biggest gathering we've ever seen besides the Egan party is at Devin and Rickon's house. There's never anybody
Hmm.
else at Pips. There's never anybody else around anywhere else. Is this a controlled environment? The sort of the inner severed and the outer severed.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting theory.
So
You
that's all
know,
I have to base it on so far, but we'll see.
I mean, but I don't know if it necessarily even implies that the people on the outside are severed, although maybe they are. Maybe we go in that direction. That's interesting. I mean, what else is a possibility, right? I mean, an easy answer would be to kind of wave our hands at it and say, well, Severance is a show that has this kind of spin
Yeah.
on a steampunk style, or
Yeah.
there's a better term than that is eluding me, that people have used in relation to shows like Maniac on Netflix, um, where it's that kind of mixed
Hmm. Yeah.
analog
Yeah.
digital sort of thing. So, I mean, yeah, we could just wave our hands at it and maybe that's the answer. It's a TV show. It's not set in our world. It's set in an alternate world. And then that world is one where people still drive Volkswagen Rabbits with cassette tape decks, even though smartphones exist.
Yeah.
Or maybe, as you say, they are kind of cut off from the rest of the world. That's an
I,
interesting
I'm very
idea.
willing to just be told that this is just an aesthetic they created for the show and that's how they wanted to do it. And I would be fine with that. I just don't know if they're doing that for a reason or not.
Yeah, yeah, something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Um, Cobell's. Any thoughts about why she gets spooked and runs away again?
I just, there's something overlordish about the board. There's something that is intimidating about them. There's something that you don't want to get on their, I mean, it's got to be worse than firing, right? Something, the board can do something to me that's worse than firing.
You
So
think,
just
is
don't
she
want.
afraid that if she goes in that building, she's never going to come out again?
Yes, yes, yeah. The Egan's can do something to me, and I would never know it. Yeah, I think that certainly is something. Certainly is there.
End up down on the testing floor with Miss Casey?
Yeah, wake up on a table, people asking me to name a state.
Maybe, maybe. I don't know. I'm really curious to see what happens with Miss Cobell moving forward because
Me
they're
too.
clearly committing to keeping her around as a character in this story. But what is she doing, right?
Hmm.
Demanding that she can go back to work, being told no, driving away, deciding to turn around, demanding that she go back to work again,
Yep.
being told no, driving away again. So where does this lead? Hopefully, it leads somewhere in terms of her deciding to work against
Yeah.
Lumen or something. But
Yeah.
I'm really curious about that.
That's one of the things. Just starting to look forward. One of the things I'm most interested in is, do we continue at this pace, or do we start to, go sort of slow and speed up, slow down, speed up? This is a fast pace. Episode 3 took us on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's only the third episode of the season, and if it continues at the pace that it's on, um, I don't know. I mean, I almost started feeling like, hey, are they going to wrap this whole thing up with season two? Actually, is that what's happening?
Yeah.
I hope not. I want them to make more show. I like the
No,
show. I
no.
want there to be more show, but definitely feels like things are coming to a head. Um, so good. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up here today?
I think that's we've covered it. Looking forward to episode 4. Definitely want to check that out as quickly as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast. If so, please do leave a good rating, review, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Appreciate it. And be sure to check out tvobsessive.com. You can find articles on Severance there every week. I'm writing weekly recap analysis articles. If you want to read things, and written work on any number of other shows as well. Please do check out the site at tvobsessive.com, poke around a bit. You can follow us on social media. So if you search for TV Obsessive, you should find us. And we'll be back next week talking about Severance.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. See you next time.